And as you can imagine, Donald Trump's statements and actions are being closely watched on this side of the border. We are joined now via Skype by Safwan Chowdhury from an organization representing Canadian Muslims. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, as you may have heard, the White House is speaking out against Donald Trump's comments today, saying that his plan to ban Muslims from entering the U.S. technically disqualify him from becoming president. What's your reaction to that?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me. And, as a member of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat, we're one of the largest Muslim communities worldwide that is united under a single leader. And we understand why leadership is so important. And when you have somebody who's running for the top office to have leadership of the United States doing things that are completely unconstitutional, it should disqualify him. Because at the end of the day, if it's against the job description that you're signing up for to uphold the Constitution, then yeah, that's a significant and a very serious problem. What concerns us the most here in Canada is when this type of dangerous rhetoric is being spread through the airwaves, and of course it's gotten plenty of media coverage, precisely what he looks for to up his polls. It can have a very dangerous ripple effect. And not only that, it actually plays right into the hands of the very terrorist, whom we all look at as a common enemy. When we look at some of these foreign terror groups that are looking to create divide and fear among the people, what Donald Trump is doing is not much different from that. He's singling out an entire community of Muslims who have been not only fundamental in the United States, but here in Canada have key roles in the formation of not only Canada, but continue till this day to be loyal citizens. Particularly myself as an Ahmadiyya Muslim, I'm taught that loyalty to my country is a part of my faith. I can't be a good Muslim if I can't be a good Canadian. So when I see this type of rhetoric coming from down south, it is deeply troubling.
You mentioned that this only plays into the hands of terrorists, and I think that's a really interesting point, because that's what they want, is to divide the East and the West, or to divide the Muslim world against the Christian world, or whatever you want to call it. So him making these types of comments only really strengthens terrorist organizations like ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Not only that, not only does it strengthen those terrorist organizations, recently here in Canada, we've seen attack against Muslims or other communities who have been discriminated against but because of this type of rhetoric. We saw when our Canadian federal election was happening, and there was this really strong anti-Muslim sentiment, which led to attacks against Muslims. And now we're seeing this coming out of the United States. So not only does it play into the hands of those terrorists, this is precisely what they try to do, which is to create fear amongst people. So this politics of fear, and to divide everyone as a citizen of the country, whether you're an American or you're a Canadian. It becomes a very, very dangerous rhetoric when you have somebody with his type of media coverage basically trying a similar strategy as the various different terror groups.
How troubling is it, though, to hear, after he made those comments, people cheering?
Well, whether it's in the United States or whether it was here in Canada during our federal elections when we had one of the parties come out with a very strong anti-Islamic sentiment. And again, there was some support for it. So it goes to show that there is a strong portion of society who is very anti-Muslim or holds these types of views. But we hope that they don't manifest in something more dangerous, or including attacks on Muslims and spread the fear of Islamophobia, which has really perpetuated ever since the Paris attacks, which we condemned in the strongest possible terms.
It's interesting to hear you talk about this because, we've covered so many stories about this, and, we post these types of stories on our website, and we get a lot of reaction, a lot of comments from people, a lot of comments that you would probably just call racist or discriminatory. And I think as Canadians, we like to believe that we aren't those things. But what have these developments, these stories, what have they shown you about maybe a lot of people in our country?
Well, I think one of the things that's really interesting is when Mr. Trump first came out to really build up his momentum, he launched this anti-Mexican campaign, this anti-immigration campaign, which saw a quick surge in his popularity. And while most of the civilized, educated people, and just people in general, were just appalled at what he was doing, including his fellow Republicans. Now he's gone one step further, and actually, after the Mexicans, he went after the African American community in the United States. Now he's going after Muslims, and these words have very strong ripple effects and have a strong reaction. What I'm curious about as a Muslim is not just what he said about Muslims, but what he said about immigrants, what he said about Mexicans, what he said about African Americans. Where and when do we draw the line? When and where is it too far? How deep can politicians go without having any consequences whatsoever?
You know, there are a lot of people that share that sentiment, that are wondering when is too much is too much. And there have actually been calls here in Vancouver for a development currently known as the Trump Tower to actually be renamed and dropped of the Trump name. What do you think about that?
Actually, that story is not isolated to Vancouver. Where I currently am in Toronto, I'm actually not too far from the Trump Tower. And this morning, one of the city councilors here in Toronto has officially put in a proposal to have the name changed. Now, I personally think, look, whether the Trump name changes off the building or not is not necessarily the solution to these types of things. And I don't think that singling out even Donald Trump, it's putting in, when we know, look, this is 2015, we do not, and we should not indulge in these types of politics. You know, this, as we all know, if we know our history, turned out to be a very dangerous thing during World War II, when we saw different head of states or different politicians come out with these very divisive sentiments, and millions of people lost their lives. I really hope that we are able to learn from our history, and whether we change the names of buildings or not is not really the solution to these types of rhetoric and this type of sentiment being shared and applauded. I think that we ought to, just like how Huffington Post did. Huffington Post, well, anything from Donald Trump, it goes into their entertainment section because that's how they treat it, as entertainment. But I think that we as a society should be better equipped to handle this type of rhetoric. And I truly hope and urge Canadians and my fellow Americans as well to not react and give him more popularity that he's looking for. You know, this very interview, us talking about him, is precisely what politicians like him look for.
Very interesting indeed. That is Safwan Chowdhury from an organization representing Canadian Muslims. Safwan, I want to thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.